meeting to order. Join me for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is anyone recording the meeting for the public? Thank you, gentlemen. Roll call, please, Mr. Boyer.
Mrs. Harenza.
Here.
Mr. Hershey.
Here.
Mrs. Kuhn.
Here.
Mrs. Phillips.
Here.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Here.
Mr. Schippers.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Torres.
Here.
Mrs. Zabinski. I apologize. Mrs.
Zabinski. Here.
I apologize. So, yes. Yes. I didn't practice before, right? So I apologize. 9 in attendance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome to our visitors. Upcoming meetings, we have a finance and facilities workshop here on Wednesday at 5:30. We have a committee of the whole meeting March 11 at 4:45. We have a curriculum workshop March 13 at 4:30. Student representative report, Adeline Cosentino and Grant Zabinski. Have you guys told us before a little bit? Did you introduce ourselves? You did tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. Okay, we won't embarrass you then. All right.
Okay, so the Wyomissing area Model UN team recently visited Washington, D.C. with their advisor, Mr. Dramby, and chaperone, Ms. Terrie, to compete in the North American Invitational Model UN Nations Conference hosted by Georgetown University. Over 3,000 student delegates competed in 42 simulations focused on historical and contemporary international issues during the 4-day competition. Our Spartans competed in 17 committees, and some of our winners include Harper Ostrich, Morgan Schuster, Vanessa Aguay, Nehal Trivedi, Charlotte Reedy, Adam El-Sabi, Arya Patel, Jasper Platt, and Jonah Mateo, who all earned accolades for their performance.
So our Minithon committee is preparing for the upcoming Minithon event. So Minithon will take place from March 9th until March 10th at the Junior Senior High School. Community hour is open to the public from 6 to 8 p.m. on March 9th. And all members of our Spartan community are invited to support our efforts to raise money for the Four Diamonds and fight against pediatric cancer.
Our Quizville team has also had an amazing season and entered the playoffs with a record of 5-3.
The Junior High Drama Club this past weekend presented their show Newsies Junior, and they did an amazing job, so we'd just like to congratulate both the cast and crew.
Members of the High School Drama Club recently participated in many county events. Amaryllis Torres sang at the Berks County Theater Showcase at the Miller Center, and 5 students, Amaryllis Torres, Maggie Sieber, Fox Peters, Grant Zabinski, and Adeline Constantino, performed at the Berks Youth Chorus annual concert.
The ski club has been very active this year and has enjoyed multiple trips. Their last trip of the season is coming up on Wednesday. Was it canceled? Yeah, I heard that today. But we're very happy that this is offered in the school system because we know a lot of students enjoy this time skiing with their friends. So.
This is very relevant, but our girls basketball team won the county championship, bringing their season to 25-0. They are the first girls basketball team to have an undefeated season in Berks County history, so we'd like to congratulate them.
Our new esports team had tryouts earlier this month and is gearing up for their season. Practices have begun and we look forward to this new opportunity for our students. We'd like to thank Mr. Grasoy and Coach Doyle for leading the team and becoming new advisors.
Our swimmers also had an amazing season. The girls swimming team earned 3rd in the county championship and boys earned 4th place recognition. They will compete in the district tournament this upcoming weekend. Our
Spartans enjoyed the first basketball season. One of our Spartan teams made it to the postseason competition and finished 4th in the Southern region. A highlight of the season was beating Kutztown, Northern region's first place teams, in the Golden Frame at a home match. Overall, our students had a great season and are very excited for next year.
Spring sports are also starting in the coming weeks. Some members of the boys volleyball team were excited to begin the season with open gyms last week, and all of our student athletes are looking forward to their spring sports.
So on to academics. This week, our 10th grade students will participate in college visits at Albright College and Albernian University. These college visits, combined with industry tours and visits to BCTC, are part of our college and career readiness program to showcase the variety of post-secondary opportunities available for our students. The junior class will be visiting Alvernia College, the Alvernia College Fair on Tuesday, March 5th, and students will have the opportunity to interact with representatives from four-year colleges, two-year colleges, trade and technical schools, and several branches of the military.
Additionally, senior students are in the application window for WAVE scholarships, which are due on March 1st. WAVE provides generous funding to our students to pursue post-secondary education, and these scholarships are made possible by the generosity of businesses, families, individuals, and groups who believe in the power of education and wanted to make a long-lasting contribution to the students of Wyomissing Area School District. We would all like to thank them and everyone who contributed to WAVE for making these scholarships possible for our students.
Upcoming are the National Honor Society and National Junior Honor Society induction ceremonies. They're both happening in early to mid-March.
Seniors have submitted their applications for Berks Best Awards. The Reading Eagle Awards Berks Best recognition to outstanding seniors in 11 categories every year, and we'd like to congratulate all the Spartans who are nominated.
Our students participating in the first installment of the Model Senate experience with Senator Schrank. Model Senate will run through the spring and will culminate in a visit to our capital in Harrisburg, PA.
Congratulations are also in order for Spartan Samantha Caraballo, whose art was chosen for the VICU Student Art Showcase.
And finally, congrats to our Spartan students whose work was chosen to be part of the 2024 Yoakum Institute Annual Juried High School Art Exhibit. A very special congratulations to senior Kaylin Galindo, who earned first place in the show.
Right. Thank you, guys. Anybody have any questions for these guys?
You did a great job.
Well, no, I see a future in broadcasting. Thanks for coming to see us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, liaison reports, PCIU, Mr. Hershey.
All right, we had our meeting on February 15th. I believe, actually I guess the email had the meeting update from January, so this one looked for that, coming from Sherry in a couple days. But nothing super pertinent to share. Our next meeting is March 21st.
Thank you. BCTC and Mrs. Torres.
Our last meeting was the 24th of January. There was an issue talked about with a student that experienced some, there was a little bit of a debate whether she should be allowed to move forward with her medical education due to a issue that she was having. So that has since been resolved, I guess. And then there was a demonstration with an AI presentation. So they would also be able to come to our school and do the presentation if we wanted to, and that's really all I have for updates.
Thank you. Berks EIT, Mr. Boyer.
No report. Next meeting is in March.
Do you have anything to say?
I do.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks.
The last board meeting was on February 20th at 6:30. It was a quick meeting and no grants were discussed during that meeting. The Student Activity Committee, which is part of WAVE, brought up Senior Day activities and the costs associated with Senior Day. Senior Day is the day, I guess everyone knows, but when the seniors take the bus in their caps and gowns to the other buildings, and it includes, I think, a luncheon here for them. One year there was an ice cream truck. So WAVE has paid these events in the past, but the grant is being depleted. And they are looking at options for the future. These options would include WAVE continuing to fund these events, holding fundraisers to raise the money to fund the events, running some sort of campaign at the Blue and White Party, and talking with administration about the possibility of sharing the costs. So as a first step, it was decided that they would reach out to discuss matters with Dr. Jones, and it will be an ongoing discussion. The next WAVE meeting is on Monday, March 18th at 12 noon.
I can tell you from personal experience, there is a fundraising effort underway with chocolate bar sales. They are fantastic. They're $2 a bar, and the proceeds go to help with WAVE funding the Senior Day event. So hopefully you guys can see some students out there with these chocolate bars.
Great.
Bring
They're
some to
awesome.
the next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and usually the senior class like that does some, like we did a car wash, I think, our year, like to try to help to, you know, like the senior class parents will try to.
I do remember that
Yeah,
year,
you
we
probably remember
sold coffee cups and things
Yeah,
like that.
oh, that's right, the one year we did coffee cups.
But I
yeah.
thought that was going to fund the event at the museum.
It did, but some of the excess went to senior day.
So do you know where the chocolate bar specifically, because they
For
didn't
senior
discuss
day.
that?
Yeah. So my daughter who's in 9th grade is selling these bars, as are others, and the proceeds go to help fund senior day.
Okay.
Really interesting. At least that's what you told me, and I bought a bunch of bars. So this is not right.
Little do you know.
We'll get to the bottom, I know, exactly. Maybe her own college fund.
Easter's coming, we can put them in everybody's baskets.
That's a great call. I like it.
Thank you, Mrs. Zabinski. Mr. Hershey, back to you for a legislative report. Is there such a thing?
There can be, yes.
No
So-
pressure.
That was
No
fine.
pressure.
So the BCIU supplies a document that lists federal, state, what's going on, basically. I don't really have anything to report, except I know when I first joined the board in August, I don't know if enjoyed is the right word. I found it interesting to read, and I will continue to read it, and if anything especially pertinent comes up, I may share in the future.
Sounds good. And we can get you plugged in. Do you get there? It's like a PSBA. When I was the legislative liaison, Sherry had something coming to me from PSBA pretty
Sure.
regularly. But
Okay.
we talked to Sherry about making sure that you're getting connected to
Okay.
that, because that's what I would then use to come and sort of give a little over, like
Right.
the highlights from it for a couple minutes. So
Okay.
we'll make sure that. But I think whoever had your job last, Mrs. Taylor, said that what comes from the IU was pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they put together, it's like a 4 or 5 page document
Yeah.
of everything that's being introduced, the
Yeah.
state and federal.
And I would just pick the highlights
Right.
once in a while. All right, sounds good. Mrs. Phillips, PTA.
Thank you. We did not have a meeting last month, so there's only 2 things to share, and that is, again, the Glow Dance is coming up March 15th for 5th and 6th grade, and they did reschedule the family night at the Skateaway, and that will be April 12th. All the information for both events is on the Facebook page, and the next PTA meeting is March 6th, 9:30 in the morning, over at the Hills.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment? Then we have routine approvals. It's recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following: January 22, 2024 Board of School Directors meeting minutes, Treasurer's report for the month of January 2024, payment of bills for the month of January 2024, as listed in the financial packet. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a quick question, and Mark, I'm sure you're tired of me harping on this, but, so the money that sits in the class of 2020 account
Yes.
was supposed to be used for the senior lounge. Can
Yes.
that money actually be moved
Yes.
over there? And then
Yeah.
can we do like a little plaque or
Yes,
something?
Mr. Kathryn is working on the plaque
Oh,
right now.
awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, that was all.
okay.
But thank you, Beth.
Yep.
Sorry to keep harping on it, I know
No,
it's like
it's
4
okay.
years
If
ago.
you need to close that out, yep.
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any further discussion? Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Mr. Scoboria.
Thank you. Obviously, Dr. Woodard is a regular at our meetings. You heard some data reports earlier in the fall. Obviously, the last couple meetings, looking specifically at some math scheduling and junior high scheduling. But the math action plan is very large, so Dr. Woodard's here tonight to give some additional highlights of some of the work that her and the team are doing, and then specifically look at kind of a larger component that's, possibly in front of the board to talk about tonight and see where it goes after this evening in terms of moving forward. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Woodard.
All right.
Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everyone. Again, I'm here to talk a little bit about math. It seems to be a trend with me and presenting to all of you. But I want to share with you a little bit about, again, how we got here and why do we have a math action plan. So I'm going to review a little bit about the comprehensive plan, a little bit about the strategic plan, and then we want to take a look at the actual math action plan focus areas. There are 6 of them. going to share a little bit of progress towards each of the focus areas, but know that I am not going to share every little action for each focus area because this has been going on since 21-22. So we're a couple of years into it. I will share a link in the Friday board update to the updated action plan, but I didn't make copies for you because there are multiple pages we just wouldn't address today because I'm really hitting on those key areas that we're focusing on this school year, if that makes sense. But I'll make sure to give you the full plan in its entirety as of now in your board update. So just kind of a little bit. So I tried to take each focus area as we go through the presentation this evening and hit 1 or 2 action items within each of those focus areas. So hopefully that will make sense. And then as Mr. Scoboria said, at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about the comprehensive study and the process we've undergone so far just to engage with an outside consultant or 2. We've interviewed a couple just to get a better handle on what people could do for us. So we're going to share that information, and there is a copy of that proposal at your seat. So I'll do a summary of that, and then we'll be able to answer any questions you may have. But this is really an informational and update. So I'm not asking for any board action around the math action plan. We'll discuss the proposal a little bit later down the road. So just so you're aware, again, we have to submit a comprehensive plan to Pennsylvania Department of Ed every 3 years. And so our comprehensive plan is currently running from 2022 to 2025, all right? Within that, we had to look at, our committees had to look at a lot of data and identify our strengths, areas of need, et cetera. And we looked at a lot of data. Now, a lot of the data that's in the Future Ready Index and such is based on state assessments, or PSSAs and our keystones. But we know that's not the only data that we have on students. However, that's easily identifiable because the state publishes a lot of those scores. We can find those things on Future Ready and sometimes even in the newspaper. So that often is one of those key areas that we look to when we're developing goals. When we took a look, our math scores have been rather, concerning low, specifically at that middle level. But we realized that we're not going to solve a problem at the middle level without looking at it more broadly, beginning in kindergarten and moving forward. And so when we had to work together to create the comprehensive goal, one of the goals is really to try to improve math achievement, really across K through 7. That's where we started, all right? But when you take a look at trying to improve math achievement, it's not just looking at one thing. You have to look at multiple factors. We look at multiple factors, and they include the curriculum that we're utilizing, which has got to be in alignment to the state standards. We have to look at the instructional practices. What are we doing? What are our teachers doing? How effective are we with our practices? To look at the resources that we're using, to look at the professional learning to help improve our practices, as well as the time allocation, the schedule, etc. So guess what? Those are all focus areas in our math action plan because it's a large beast to tackle. And so, and as you can see, the comprehensive plan goal is quite wordy. But what we're really saying is we have to look at this curriculum across our foundation, really K to 7, and we've got to tackle it a couple of different ways. And the way we tackle it is based on the action plan. So the comprehensive plan and goal is kind of the overarching thing that drives us, but that in of itself isn't going to get the work done. We have to take that information and create an action plan to do so. In addition, when we worked with our strategic plan, which was really the administration and the board of directors working in tandem, we needed to take a look at improving that math achievement. And I like to say that math achievement is one piece, math growth or student growth is another. Math achievement is represented by the percent proficiency. It's like hitting a benchmark. So in other words, did 70% of our kids hit that benchmark, hit that proficiency? That's achievement, and the state definitely looks at that. But what the state also looks at, and what we've really started to look at more closely, is the growth. Because there are those kids that aren't meeting the benchmark right now, but the key is, are they growing more than 1 year's worth of growth in a school year? And believe it or not, statistically, through all of the information the state can gather, they can help us to determine whether students are in fact growing a full year for each school year they spend with us. Now, the issue is, if you're starting with a student who is below level, you actually want them to grow more than 1 grade level in order to close that gap, right, and get closer to the achievement. So a long time ago, when I started really looking at this, several years ago, one of my colleagues would be famous for saying, you really want to show growth with your growth scores. Because if you are growing that, you're going to start to peck away at that achievement percentage, right? Because eventually, the more you grow, the more people are going to hit that achievement benchmark. But I think that that's really important, because a lot of times we only think about, did we hit that ultimate benchmark? And for some kids are really working at the below basic. For them to hit that benchmark in a year is almost impossible. But are they growing out of below basic and towards proficiency more quickly than we would expect? That's a positive. And so I think we always want to look at looking at how we can foster student growth and student achievement. So there was a very quick description of the difference between growth and achievement. But it's important because it guides a lot of our work. All right, so with that in mind, I just mentioned most of these focus areas. It takes all of these factors to really put together into an action plan that's going to benefit us and produce for us in the long run. Okay, so I'm going to hit these different areas one by one and just pull apart a couple of different things for each focus area. The first focus area in our math action plan are the instructional resources. And I like to say that, your instructional resources are kind of the books that you use, the materials that you use, and the supplemental materials that you use. We had determined a couple of years ago that we were going to use Eureka Math Squared as our instructional resource for K to 7. So I didn't put that on here because that decision was made before. But we really invested a lot of time this year in working with our teachers on IXL and also the IXL diagnostic. It's a tool. It's certainly not the only tool, but it's a wonderful supplemental tool to help us meet students where they are. We've really focused this on K to 6. I'm looking at too many different screens. I'm like, I'm just going to focus on it. It's definitely a tool that can help us. And you might say, Missy, why are we only using it in K to 6? We have the subscription K to 12. One of the things we have to try to balance is the number of minutes we have kids in the classroom. And because it's 41 minutes in 7th and 8th, it's harder for our teachers to incorporate that in instructionally. So the benefit of down the road increasing those instructional minutes can help us utilize some of these tools more effectively. But we are working very closely with our teachers. Our instructional coaches are supporting our building administrators. We are learning more about the use of IXL because it can be used in a couple of different ways. One, it can be used, let's just say in math, I'm teaching 2-digit fractions. I may assign a lesson in IXL that has the students practice, what did I just say? I would say two-digit multiplication. They are practicing 2-digit multiplication. So it matches exactly what I'm teaching in the classroom, if that makes sense. It's more reinforcement of a new skill. But we all know, just like I said, the growth, some kids aren't ready quite for that. We have this, what's called an IXL diagnostic. Kids take an initial baseline assessment. And as long as they spend 15 to 20 minutes a week on that IXL diagnostic, we call it in the arena, they are working on skills that are just for them, tailor-made just for them. So for instance, I may be in a 4th grade classroom, but I may have some skills that are at the 2nd or 3rd grade level. That IXL diagnostic is creating a pathway for me to practice those skills to match where I am. But my neighbor in the classroom might be in 4th grade, but working on skills in 5th or 6th grade. And so it's tailoring to meet those. It is a wonderful opportunity for differentiation. And the best part of this is the teacher hasn't had to figure that all out. It is all done within the system. So we're trying to help teachers figure out how to utilize time so that kids can be on IXL diagnostic and keep their levels pinpointed, meaning they're alive and they're exactly where they need to be at that time. And it's a wonderful form of remediation, but it's also a wonderful form of enrichment. And it's interesting because I bring this up. Mrs. Allen has utilized IXL quite a bit in the classroom, as well as Mrs. Frandino in 6th grade. This is just an example. But Mrs. Allen had said to me, "You're never going to believe this, Missy. Like, I have kids who are working on Algebra 2 skills and concepts in my 6th grade classroom. I don't have the ability to pull them aside and work on that, but they've worked up to that point. They're getting tutorials, they're applying their knowledge. They are incredible." So we all came together actually with the group today. And Ms. Terrie said, "This is what I'm teaching right now." And these kids are up to that level. And so when we make the conversation right now about, are we putting students into accelerated algebra 1 in 7th grade or accelerated pre-algebra, this is another great data point for us to utilize. It's not just the PSSA. It's not just the unit test. This is another place for us to say, here's where the students are working independently. Really, we haven't had that data point before. So it's really important that we are getting that from these.
So the IXL diagnostic is different than what they have just plain IXL.
It's all IXL, but a teacher could assign an IXL that's exactly connected to what they're teaching in the classroom, or when they're in the arena, it's what it's telling me I need to do.
Okay.
If that makes sense, but it's all under IXL. It's
Okay.
all the same.
And doesn't, IXL follows them from year to year to year?
Yes.
And they can actually go back
Yes.
to the previous years and go ahead, like you're saying right now.
Yep.
But as they get to the next grade,
It'll
it
pick up where
follows
they left
them
off.
and tracks everything.
Yep. Yep.
Because I know Dylan still does
Mm-hmm.
a lot of
Yeah.
IXL.
Right.
And what I really like about the program is it hones in as to what they're not doing well, and
Correct.
it throws that right back at them.
Absolutely. And the key is to keep it live like that, to be responsive. You need to be on it like 20 minutes a week,
Yeah.
just in the arena. When you're not using the arena, if a teacher's just assigning them to skills that are connected to what they teach and not what I really need, I lose that pinpointed level. I have to go back in and spend some more time on that. So it is really responsive. So again, this is a resource that we didn't have, and quite frankly, IXL's been around for a while. IXL diagnostic was new last year. It was new across the board. And so we learned a little bit about it, and we're learning more about it. And I think that's important. So, and I think the more we talk about differentiation, meeting students where they are, is a key tool like this.
So the kids really like it.
I'll be honest, and I can talk from a parent perspective too. Kids prefer working in the arena more so than a lesson assigned by the teacher that just matches what I'm teaching. Why? Because in some cases that's hard. Whereas the diagnostic is what I need. And that's where I can talk to as a parent. I'll get battled by my son at home when he is expected to do something that is really, really difficult. But when he's working in the arena, when he's working where he should be, it's not an issue. Because it's growing with them.
Yeah.
But you will hear sometimes kids say that IXL assignment is really, really hard. Chances are it's not in the arena or in the diagnostic, it's as a result of just what I'm learning.
Because when
level
they're doing that
expectations.
work, if they get it wrong, it gets them back.
Correct.
And it adds more time onto what they're doing, in case some people aren't familiar with
Yeah.
how IXL works.
Yeah, but the diagnostic isn't quite like that in the
Yeah.
arena, so, yeah. But I just think it's important for you to realize that it takes a combination of a lot of different resources to make this happen. Eureka Math Squared is our primary resource, but we supplement it with a lot of different things, this one being one that we find to be very, very helpful. When I talk about the main resource, the addition of that algebraic concepts course in 8th grade requires us to look at another primary resource for 8th grade because it's not Algebra 1 anymore, and we can't use the same resource we used in 7th grade. And so we are moving into Eureka Math Squared for grade 8, which is all aligned to our 8th grade standards, and now it gives us coherency and consistency of resources across K to 8, which then should get us ready for Algebra 1. So that was the resource that we've determined makes a lot of sense for us. So we made that determination. Obviously, that was kind of in our back pocket, but with the move to the program of studies to put in algebraic concepts next year, we just made that official determination for Eureka Math Squared. The second focus area, again, not instructional resources this time, but instructional practices. So what are we as teachers doing? And research is showing us that small group instruction, data-informed practices are really advantageous. It's what makes everything effective in the classroom. And so working really hard with our building principals, our coaches, and our math teachers in trying to increase the amount of small group instruction in our classrooms. Our administrators at all levels are conducting walkthroughs. They're going into classrooms anywhere from 6 to 15 minutes, 6 to 12, 6 to 15 minutes, taking a look at what's going on in math classrooms. Are our students. Now, if I happen to go in early on, it might be a whole group math lesson initially, but it's not a whole group math lesson the whole time. We're taking that and then we're dividing off into rotations and stations so that a teacher can work with a small group of students while another group is, guess what, doing IXL diagnostic, because it's meaningful for them because they're working where they need to be. And another group might be applying it in different problem solving, collaborative activities. So the key is you see a very energetic and moving classroom. That's the key. And I'm really proud of the work of our teachers and our administrators. Our small group instruction has really grown over this year. It's really, but it's been a lot of support, a lot of work also by our coaches to help in growing those techniques. When you're used to teaching to an hour and you're the stage and the kids are listening and doing some problems with you, working small group and balancing small group is a big difference. And so we are definitely making progress there. We also use a lot of data for our MTS meetings. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in intervention supports. Yes, the other piece, I guess, here is the instructional practices. It's the amount of feedback that our principals are providing to our teachers, which I think is really important. Just like kids, we respond well to feedback. And so the specific feedback that of an instructional leader is really to help us inform and improve our instructional practices. And so we really have some great headway across the board in all of the buildings here to give our teachers specific feedback about their practices. So I think that's a positive that we've been really working on.
Share with them that thing that you've taught us when we've been hiring. It's a sentence that you say about principals. They should be. You've taught us when we're hiring a new principal. It's like that they should be their primary job is to be the instructional leader of the building. And so it's nice to hear that you're energizing that because hasn't always been what we were hearing from you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, being a building principal or assistant principal is tough. And you have to have the management piece and the operational piece, but you have to have that instructional leadership capacity. And you've got to be able to go in, and I might have been a math teacher, but I can provide great literacy strategies and practices too, because good teaching is good teaching. But it's my responsibility as a building level leader to grow our practices within our teachers. And I'll tell you, it's our principals also learning more about instruction and good instruction and some good conversations that we're having. I'm going along with a few people down to King of Prussia in a few weeks to learn more about IXL from an administrator piece point of view. So and we've sent other of our administrators to other conferences and learning more about different things. The leadership series on artificial intelligence, AI. Like, it's important that we stay up on this because running a building is more than putting the schedule together. It's really giving good, specific feedback for our teachers. And that's what they're wanting, I think, really to make the change. So we're trying more and more to get into the classrooms. It's helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess as far as, number 3, so professional learning. So I think also, how do we know what our teachers need? Well, we ask them, we have grade level meetings, department meetings, et cetera. But we also know through our coaches, we rolled out Eureka Math Squared last year. That doesn't mean just because you rolled it out 1 year that you're experts in it. And so we have to continue to say, let's give them support along the way for implementation. Doesn't end in year 1. And so we've used in-service days. Columbus Day is an example where I think that the elementary use half a day just on Eureka Math Squared, diving in. We're doing early dismissals. When students go home, teachers get together and they're looking at, resources and how to better implement those resources. We are doing, so we're planning a March 8th mini conference here, and some of it's going to be on best practice math instruction, and it's also going to be on small group instruction. It's going to be on engagement. It really matters about that. I mentioned to you about the IXL, so we sent a team earlier this year that wasn't admin. It was coaches and teachers, and they came back and they led sessions for us. It's called Train the Trainer. It doesn't always have to come from an administrator either. It can come from their colleagues. Speaking of coming from our colleagues, book studies. So our math department has a book study going on this year here at the high school, junior, senior high school, on building thinking classrooms, which is a lot of building problem solving and critical thinking, and how do I grow that in my students. We did that this summer for a summer book study, and then our coaches are supporting teachers throughout the school year. So professional learning is huge. You can't move forward without professional learning. So, I really hope everybody understands the amount of time and commitment that we put together in creating professional learning that is valuable. This is just examples of math, but we're also dealing with professional learning across the board with other content areas too.
And you're generally seeing that embraced by that wasn't always the case. We had some trouble along the way of staff, for whatever reason, embracing or not embracing professional learning. So are you feeling more cooperation in that regard?
We're trying to get more input. I think that's important. What do teachers need? What do teachers want? And, for March 8th, I just sent an email on Friday to the facilitators. We have 20-some facilitators, and they're our own teachers facilitating for their colleagues. Okay. Now, I will tell you, some people are a little uncomfortable with that, but we see good practices and we say to them, okay, so in some cases we've got a coach co-facilitated with a teacher because it was the way that person felt a little comfortable the first time. But we've got new facilitators. We've got other facilitators who've been helping us out, for the past year and a half or so. But for the most part, teachers prefer learning from their colleagues. And there's a lot of choice in the professional learning sessions that we're offering. But we're trying, I think that helps too. Our principals notice good things, our coaches notice good things, so we reached out and tried to get some of those folks to agree to lead. So I think with that grows a culture where it's more accepting, but I think I say you can learn so much from the person down the hall. It's giving people the confidence they need to be able to share that. So I think it's getting better, and I do see, I think too, the culture of coaching helps to grow that as well. And just opening the doors of your classroom to have somebody else come in and work side by side. And that can be every day. I bring up some of the stuff that happens at early dismissals or at morning PD or after school PD, but it happens during the school day too. And that's where we see, people going in side by side in the math classroom, offering support and modeling and working with teachers. So I think that's a culture that takes a while to grow, but I think it's growing. The tricky part here, I guess, is intervention supports. This is focus area number 4. So we're in year 2 of an official like MTSS, that's multi-tiered system of supports. So we come together, there's a lot of acronyms here. We come together and we meet with our team, so in intervention planning meetings. What are intervention planning meetings? Team of teachers, reading specialists, math intervention teacher at the Hills, school counselors, building administrators, Mrs. Mangold is supervisor of instruction and assessment. Sometimes I get a chance to come in and sit and listen. And the classroom teacher shares some of the data that he or she has on students in the classroom, where kiddos are falling as far as maybe deficits in certain skills and areas, and how can we provide additional supports to meet their needs. Listen, tier 1 happens in the regular classroom, general classroom. Sometimes I can differentiate if I'm a classroom teacher enough to meet the students' needs in a small group. Sometimes though, the deficits are greater than a grade level. Sometimes they're 2 grade levels, and these kids may or may not be identified with a special education disability needing an IEP, but they're struggling in some areas. We pull that information together during these planning meetings, and we say, okay, here are the deficits of skills. How can we provide supports, intervention, direct instruction that might be outside of the classroom? So because we have a math intervention teacher at the Hills, we've been able to really pull together a nice intervention system for our kids K to 4. So nice so that the IE has asked our math intervention folks to speak and share how we've done this and what criteria we use. We're kind of one of the people of districts on the forefront in the county in our MTSS for math. So that's something to be proud of, the work that we're doing. And in addition to that, K to 4, we've started the process in 5-6. We are not as far along in the process with 5-6 at West Reading as we are K to 4. This is the first year at 5-6 we're trying to put some things together with criteria, with different assessments, etc. Part of the issue is we don't have that dedicated math intervention teacher at 5-6. However, you know, we've started to be creative with some of our personnel, and that might be what it takes. But we're starting to get there. I guess if I...
So we don't have anybody dedicated in 5-6?
Not strictly dedicated. Our math teachers do provide some intervention during school, during the WIN time, specifically in 6th grade. We've gotten through 3 cycles of that. We're in our first cycle with 5th grade, trying to figure that out during the WIN time. So a little bit, slower in developing, but we're getting there. We actually have our library clerk who is capable of running somewhat of an intervention there. It's going to be obviously different than a math certified teacher, but she is some good help there, so you have to look. So we're trying to piece things together, but it's not as seamless as it is K to 4.
Dr. Wood and I were meeting today. We have to sit down with Dr. Babb, but we have some thoughts on a way that maybe we can reallocate. It needs a little bit more work, but that is our goal, is to have a larger chunk of intervention time available at the 5-6 building to kind of build on what the kids are now used to getting in terms of support now K to 4. So more to follow. There's a meeting, I believe, on personnel, not this finance facilities, but the next one. We're going to do a chunk of personnel as well. So we need a little bit of work to come back to you with it, but we have some thoughts on a way we can capture more intervention time.
In K4, we just have 1 math interventionalist.
Right.
Although we have 3 reading interventionalists and have had 3 reading interventionalists for many years, and we've only had 1 math interventionalist for...
This is our 3rd year, because we utilize the ESSER funding. So this is our 3rd year for Mrs. Beidler. And just so you might be wondering, what does Mrs. Beidler do? First, we have benchmark assessments for everybody, K to 4. That means everybody gets tested, right, on a certain assessment. When we take a look at those results, we identify the students who are below a certain level, and we give them additional types of assessments to determine what specifically they have deficits in. Then we all take a look at that during that IPM, that intervention planning meeting, and we decide, okay, Mrs. Beidler, how can you group these students that you can pull them in what's called either tier 2 or tier 3? It's a lot of terminology. Tier 1 is general classroom, what happens in regular math. Tier 2, they need a little bit of support, but not as drastic amount of support as Tier 3. So what does Tier 2 look like at K to 4 right now? It's 20 minutes per group, 3 sessions a cycle. So if you look at it, we have 6 days in a cycle. So 3 of those days, they're getting pulled for 20 minutes. Believe it or not, Mrs. Beiler, I met with her last week, she said, you know what, Mrs., 20 minutes is good because it's a small group and we really target a specific skill. What you have to understand is, it's not the same skill that they're learning. If it's a 4th grader, it's not necessarily the 4th grade classroom skill because they have deficits more in the foundation, like beneath that. So it might be a 2nd or 3rd grade skill, but she's got to get them up there, you know, and so she's targeting this. So she'll say, once in a while the teacher says, hey, we're going to do something really hard with fractions, could you help with that? And Mrs. Butler says, no, my job is to hit those deficits so that then they can be more successful. I have some little bit of data, and there are kids that move in and out, which is good. Now, Tier 3, she might be working with kiddos for a while for Tier 2. We have another planning meeting, and guess what? And she's progress monitoring, by the way, the whole time. She's giving assessments bi-weekly, just to see how we're doing. Are we getting better, you know, with this work, specific work, or not? When they come together and they just determine that Tier 2 is not enough, now they can be moved to Tier 3, which means they're coming with Mrs. Beiler 20 minutes every day. Okay, really specific, honing in. So we may move kids from Tier 2 to Tier 3. If after an extended period of time, we still see them in Tier 3 they're not, there may be students who are referred for special education evaluation. But this is all part of like child find and making sure that we're doing our best job to identify and follow these students. I think that's key. So it can't happen overnight. You have to go through periods and cycles of, we're trying this, it's not working, let's change the intervention, we're trying this, it's not working, you know, but after a certain point, we get to a place where we may have to, you know, refer for evaluation. This is just a quick sampling. You'll see T3 is Tier 3, Tier 2 is, T2 is Tier 2. The number of students who started in Tier 3 and Tier 2 for each grade level at the beginning of the year. Those kiddos, most of them, and you'll see there are no kindergartens, we didn't start them right off because we gave them a chance, right? But most of those kids ended the year last year in a Tier 2 or Tier 3. Okay, so we kind of started with them in the beginning of the year because we knew, you know what, chances are they're going to need these supports right away. So Mrs. Beiler started with them early on. Then we re-examined in November, had some of our meetings, and started to talk. And so we've identified, you know, we may have identified more kids for Tier 2. We have may have moved them from Tier 2 to Tier 3. We may have exited. So if you look at 3rd grade, I highlighted one exited Tier 2. That means he was in Tier 2, doing really, really well, back to the classroom, no need for additional pullout. That is a win, okay? And you know, you love to see that. It happens. It doesn't always happen, you know, but it's good to see that because even after a couple months of work, we were able to see, and they're doing really well in the classroom. And that's the good sign too. They're not needing to come back. We had these other meetings in February, again. And you're going to see that we've exited some kids from Tier 2 again. In 3rd and 4th grade, exited 5 kids across those 2 grade levels. That's awesome to see. You'll also see in red, we referred a couple for special education. And Mrs. Beiler said, you know what, this is more than I haven't recommended 4 kids to go evaluation. However, last year she recommended 2 kids and both kids were found to have a disability in math. So I think the key is, we have a lot of data showing us this is probably what's necessary because we're not jumping to an assumption. We've got the data to back it up. So I'll be curious once they go through the eval process whether these 4 students do end up having a disability in math. And if so, great, we found them in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And if not, okay, then their school psychologists can give us ideas and recommendations to better meet those students' needs. So this is good data to have. And again, we didn't have a lot of this data. You know, we're gathering more and more this year, even better than last year. So I thought it was important to share with you because intervention supports is a focus area for our math action plan.
Can I ask a quick question? So one of the things we heard during the Hills tour today, it sounds like there's not as much volunteerism as has been in the past, where you go out in the hallway and you flip math cards with kids and that sort of thing. Watchdogs
Yeah.
always do that.
Yeah.
What's happened there, and is it something that could be brought back to help with math?
I would never turn down like somebody, an option to pull. I think, math facts is definitely an easy way to help. It's not going to be the whole answer, but
Sure.
it certainly is an easy way to help. And I mean, I think we do have pretty decent math, Watchdog Dad participation, but I think we have less regular volunteers.
The last time I went through, I noticed more in the first, second wing that I assumed were volunteers, because they were, almost every classroom had somebody
Yeah,
out in the hallway, maybe not as much in
right.
the third and fourth, but I did notice a fair amount in the hallway
Yeah.
first, second. But we can follow up.
I'm just curious
To
if
see-
it was attrition or if there was a
Yeah.
concerted
Yeah,
decision, somebody said, let's not
right.
have so many volunteers in the school, or
I
post-COVID.
think
or-
COVID, yeah.
Was it COVID?
With a lot.
So we haven't gotten back on track with
I know,
volunteers and post-COVID.
we can check with Dr. Redcase. So I think each principal that's been in has tried a little bit different way to maybe organize it, so that the teachers and the volunteers somewhat have a plan that they're, or a menu of options that they're working under. So we could probably follow up on that and, get a little bit more information on that. If he's seeing more or less, do they want more, and what we could do to support him if he does want more volunteers.
Right, remove some of the pressure on the interventionist. If
Yeah.
She can send a couple of kids out,
Sure.
focus on some other kids.
Especially if you had some well-trained volunteers.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what, that was
Yeah.
popping out at me too, I
Right.
guess something I get from PSBA
Yeah.
says like, that, what do they call it, high-impact tutoring, right? And so there are, it seems that we have volunteers that could be trained to do a little more than flip flash, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
actually do some of this intervention stuff.
And I think that's the piece where after COVID, when we brought volunteering back, we wanted to make sure we did have a purpose for it and training, and so our volunteers do go through some training. And maybe that's why we don't have quite the number we used to, but I think that it's important that we do understand, how to effectively work with kids,
Even after-school internship programs for the
Right.
seniors, who want to go over to West Reading or the Hills and
Yeah.
help with math or something.
Well, and also in West Reading, a lot of the kids, when they're broken out into smaller groups, are working with the paras there. So I don't know if they're getting any special training in how to instruct those math skills to the kids when they're broken out to the para.
Right.
I think I'm using the right terminology.
Yeah, absolutely. And paraprofessionals, instructional aides, paraprofessionals must go through training every year. It's part of their responsibility. And our instructional aides, we're working with them. Some of them are teacher trained, they just have chosen not to serve as teachers, and so you use those benefits as well, because they're very effective. Like I said, Mrs. Snerick in the library, she has been awesome, that to help us. That's been a gift. So we explain to her what we need, we train her what we need, and she's able to do that. So it's a help.
I think you shared with me today, we have 100 kids signed up at West Reading for, and I don't mean to jump if I.
Yeah,
took-
this is the slide.
I was
102.
amazed at that number because there's about 300 kids in the school. So about 100 signed up for math after school. So you could say.
ELA and math after school
Okay.
tutoring. 102 students we have coming in. So some of them come in twice a week, some come in 4 times a week. 102 students staying after school.
And you can still do the
So-
Olivet if you're a kid in the Olivet. You can
Mhm.
kind of work that in and then just go over to the Olivet after.
And who's doing that tutoring?
Our classroom teachers, pay them the hourly rate, and so they work with them for 45 minutes, and then they can take the activity bus home, or, the extra bus.
That's at Hills and Rec, or just Rec?
Just at rec
Just
right
at
now.
rec right now.
Mhm,
And that's
yeah.
students choosing to go, or parents are
Yeah.
choosing them to go.
Or
is it teacher
we're
recommendation?
encouraging that.
They're
Yes.
voluntold.
Yeah, sounds right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
strong recommendations.
Strong
Gotcha,
recommendations.
gotcha. So strong recommendation from the teacher.
From the teacher.
But we do notice with
Basically.
parents, when we offer it after school, a lot of parents, because it actually fits better into, their work schedule or whatever they're doing. They know their child's getting good
Yeah.
instruction or recreation, either way. It a lot of times fits better into, picking their child up from school after work.
Would that ever
So-
work for 7th and 8th? Great.
Well, we have our teachers available at 2:35,
Right,
so
right, I
that's
know
one
they're
option.
there, yeah, that is
But
one
I think we're also working to try to come up with peer tutoring as well here at the junior senior high. One of our teachers is going through a principal certification program, is trying to get something off the ground as part of a project. So that can happen potentially during period 12, that 2:35 time, but also perhaps down the road, larger scale, during study halls, you know, when students might be available. So looking at it a couple of different ways.
Can I ask a question? And I might be going to a bigger issue, so feel free to tell me, table that, put a pin in it, or whatever they say. So the 5-6 building is an elementary school. As a parent with kids in both elementary buildings, there's tons of stuff at the Hills in terms of intervention and small group and really differentiating that instruction. And then you get to the 5-6 building, and at least in 5th grade, it disappears. And some of the issues that I've had as a parent, some of the teachers feel that they really need to prepare these 10 and 11-year-olds for high school, which I know you and I have had conversations about this, but it's either an elementary school or it's a middle school. And I kind of feel like things get lost in the translation. So when we talk about elementary stuff, it's always K through 6, but it's so different for those 5-6 kiddos. And I'm just wondering how we can bridge that gap a little bit. And again, that may be a bigger issue, so.
I completely agree. It's called West Reading Elementary Center, and you're talking to a person who was a principal of a K-6 building. So I consider 5th and 6th grades to be elementary. You know, I'll at least call them younger middle level students, but it's not a high school, you know, and we do, believe it or not, have more small groups and doing those kind of things at 6th grade versus 5th grade, which could just be personalities and just kind of, you know, but we are working with our teachers to try to incorporate that. I know Dr. Babb sent me 2 emails last week that he was in 2 different 5th grade classrooms and seeing small group. So I mean, like, so we are working towards that, but it's a process. You know, again, like I said earlier, when you're used to doing something for the majority of your career, a change to instructing in a different way is difficult. So we're trying to continue to work with our teachers to incorporate more small group, but I think you'll see just by nature of how things are done, there's more of that going on in 6th than in 5th, but that doesn't excuse it. Like, we're trying to get there, if I can say that.
Can I just add on to what Terrie is saying?
Sure.
That has got to be the #1 complaint that I do hear from parents all the time. It happens a lot more in 6th grade, and I don't think it gets any better in 7th and 8th grade. I mean, it can, but I agree with Terrie. It's supposed to be an elementary, and 7th and 8th is supposed to be that junior high. And I just feel like the kids are moved from 5th grade, put into 6th grade, and then it's like, okay, you're all on your own. Like, you have to deal with this. And it's one of the biggest complaints that I hear from so many parents.
Yeah, so I will say it's a work in progress. You know, I hope we're going to continue to get more effective with some of those pieces. You know, so, and I know our coaches are working upstairs with 7th grade in trying to incorporate more small groups, you know, across the board, in math, but in other things as well. And I think our STEEL standards in science are going to encourage more of that. So as some of our standards change, our teaching practices have to change, and that's that's why it's part of our action plan. So, and it's why it's a multi-year action plan, because it's not going to get fixed overnight, but I think we recognize where we have to target and put some help in there.
I should know this, but we have a coach in the 5th, 6th building or not?
We do have a coach there part-time, which again, it's a smaller building, so Mrs. Matz has been supporting the coaching there as well. And supporting quite a bit in all content areas, but she's a former math teacher, so she is very, very comfortable helping our math teachers figure this all out too. So, yeah. I have here just a couple of numbers. So as you can see, you know, at the Hills, we're seeing, you know, anywhere between 42 and 50 some students in our intervention tier 2 and tier 3. Here, you know, we're seeing about 15, 16 or so. Now, it's 2 grade levels, but we're just trying to piece it together. So we recognize that, you know, we've got to continue to try to figure out how to most effectively meet these students' needs. So
That's a really sorry, but so who's doing the intervention if there isn't enough?
So, like in 6th grade, our math teachers are kind of like those kids, their students might go somewhere else and they're pulling together kids from across the grade level during win time to offer those, which is certainly one very good strategy, but we don't have that extra person to swoop in and help out, if that makes sense. And it's also not necessarily happening during math instruction, it's happening during the intervention block only. Whereas at the Hills, it's happening during math, you know, as well as their intervention block, so, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So it sounds like IXL and the math intervention are both coming in to raise and fill those foundational gaps for the students.
Mm-hmm.
How are the parents being involved in that process? Are they informed that their children are?
They are informed that they're getting intervention supports.
Okay.
We do not ask for permission. We just tell them that this is what your child is getting. Because again, we're in charge of those kiddos for the time they are here. And so now if a parent does not want their child receiving those intervention supports, we'll go through that process. But all the work I've ever done with kiddos getting intervention, we like to say, this is the data we have. We're going to provide this intervention to your students.
And I think that's fantastic. I guess in my mind I was wondering if we could leverage IXL and that arena at home to start filling those foundational gaps and reinforce that knowledge.
Yeah. I would love to see that. There are teachers who say, if they do IXL at home, are the kids doing the IXL or the student or the parents doing the IXL? And if it's in the arena, then they might be moving up more quickly than they really should be if their parents are helping. But again, I can tell you from my own son, like he will work in his arena and not ask me for help. But the minute that he's asked to do something that's grade level expected, it's hard for him, is when I get the, Mom, can you just do this for me kind of thing. Okay, I'm not lying. And sometimes it's me, yeah, you've done this more recently than I have. Or, you know, Brian, you're the engineer, I can't remember this. So it's a whole family conversation. But I think when they're dealing in the arena at the skill level they're supposed to be, it's not such a hassle then, if that makes sense, you know? So I don't have an issue with it, but I know some folks are a little bit nervous about assigning things at home. It will be student work or will be parent work, and then have to adjust things.
How is IXL introduced to the students? Do they really understand that it is a tool?
Yeah.
They don't think it's just like a game that they're doing a little bit of after they finish the other parts of the workbook.
Right. It doesn't really seem gamified as some of the other stuff we've done in the past. You know, I think they can earn stuff, but it's not really gamified. So I believe they are. I mean, we're using it so much now. It's kind of just the expectation. And the nice thing is it's just what you do when you're in this small group. Like, oftentimes when you do small group instruction, one is working with technology. That's just what is expected there. So it's just kind of the flow. It's amazing what the kids, when it's routine, how they just do it. You know. The final thing, I guess I should say the fifth focus area. We talked a lot about over the past couple months the time allocations and increasing 7th and 8th grade math instructional minutes. So I highlighted the schedule. And this is where we've brought in a couple different consultants, one via virtual, another in-person, DevOpar being the in-person one. And you have that DevOpar consulting proposal at your seats. Just so you're aware, I'm going to hit a couple of key things to summarize the proposal, but you certainly review it at your convenience. And just because I'm sharing this with you doesn't mean we're moving forward. This obviously takes a board action item to be approved, but we wanted to at least kick off to having the discussions about utilizing an outside consultant to help us with a potential revision of the junior senior high schedule. This group, DevOpar, it's unique in that it has very strong ties to Berks County. There are a couple of folks, they are very trained and expertise in educational professionals, both in operational as well as instructional and curricular areas. I know one of the folks is Mrs. Cindy Marjeski, and I worked with Dr. Marjeski a lot over my career and her career. She was a teacher in the same district I was, but she's also been a principal and a curriculum person and a superintendent, and she really definitely has that strong instructional knowledge. And then I know Mr. Selmer, he is great with operations. He's tied to Reading School District and also worked heavily, I believe, in Harrisburg as well. So he's just got a lot of expertise, that certainly I don't have. And then they also have Dr. Sneath, who is another very key instructional curricular person and excellent at different scheduling pieces. So it's this nice group that has come together to really listen to us as to kind of what we need with this potential master scheduling project. They took some of that information that we shared and they drew up this proposal. It's really a 3-phase proposal, and so I just hit a couple of the deliverables under each phase. So phase 1 is that data collection and research. So that scope would include interviewing key administrators, interviewing key personnel, walking through our facilities, morning, noon, afternoon, really getting a sense for what does it look like upstairs at all different times of the day. Meetings with stakeholder focus groups. Those are teachers, administrators, parents, board of school directors, lots of different people who have connections and ties to what goes on upstairs. So those interviews, and they take all of that data, creating a presentation for us as cabinet, but also certainly they offer to present to our entire board, really summarizing the findings that they have. That's phase 1. They were able to give us a cost not to exceed, and so you'll see that it's $16,991.
Dr. Wood, I don't want to interrupt you at all.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just two of the key things that we know, just from one is, why would we look at something like this? Why would we entertain spending this amount of money?
Yeah.
The instructional time that we spend on each subject is very important. We know that we're behind the curve in math, and Dr. Woodard went over that at the last couple of meetings. So, right there, instructional time is a big piece of this. The other issue that we've learned over the last few years being here is, it's a 7-8 building, it's a 9-12 building, and we're sharing staff throughout that. And, we always want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our 7th, 8th grade students. We want to meet the needs of our 9th, 12th grade students. And sometimes they're different needs, but almost everything we try to do comes back to the bell schedule. It's so powerful that it draws a lot of what you want to do, you can do, you can't do. So we don't know that there needs to be a change, but we do know that a lot of the initiatives we've entertained and tried are somewhat delineated by a 41-minute bell schedule that's running the building 7 through 12 with staff across that, and that's very unusual. There's not many districts that have one bell schedule 7 through 12. Most have done a school within a school and maybe separate. So the group, I think, what they could do is help us study what are the options that the board could look at, and can we even afford to do? What would be the implications of cost and curriculum implications? So, it is a big venture, but schedules are also near and dear to our heart. So anybody who works in a building, you get very attached to what you're doing. So it becomes a large issue to just tackle where, like Dr. Woodard and I, if we just go around and try to do this ourselves, it could be pretty cumbersome. But bringing in some outside expertise and kind of a third-party look takes away a little bit of that difficulty that you have when somebody says, hey, we might be looking at schedule changes. It's a little more neutral than just Dr. Woodard. They might say, hey, that's something you did in your former district, or that's a schedule you like. They're separate from all of that. They're coming in to look at the data, look at the staffing, look at the money we're allocating to the building, come up with some recommendations. So I didn't mean to interrupt at all, but when you see that number or something, that's a big number. But this is a really big project if we want to do it.
I think the biggest concern of the proposal, though, is 2/3 of the costs are unknown.
Yeah.
So you're already deep in before you even know.
Exactly.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
Can they not give you any more sort of estimates based on some of the school systems and folks who've been through it before? Something, a range or something?
Well, and when we get to phase 3, what they said with phase 3 is if we get to phase 3 and we're still in this project, is we may not need their support to do it. So phase 3 might be that the district just says, hey, we have the personnel now to implement, the board and the community has decided on a plan, so we're not sure we would need support for level 3. Level 2, they felt that it was too hard to kind of put a dollar figure on it. An example is if you're moving from 41-minute to block scheduling, or if you're going with 2 separate school schedules. And so there just wasn't enough known about what would be the option to give us a really good price. Now, they did say that they didn't believe they would hit that number in the first one. It's a not to exceed. And certainly if the board wants to work with them, we would outline a more concrete cost. We would, when you look at stakeholder meetings, we would plan all that out with them. So then we could come back with a much more detailed cost. The other group was much more expensive that we did interview. One district, I think, had used them in Berks County, and they said, we won't do anything with you for less than $25,000. They kind of had a starting price without any detail to us.
But was that more of an apples to apples based on phasing and?
I think it was, yeah, because there was, 25 was just the entry level. It was going to be significantly more.
For the assessment.
So again, this is we don't have to decide this tonight. We thought we would give you the proposal. We could certainly, I know Mrs. Kuhn and Dr. Woodard can maybe talk about, maybe we could fit this into a curriculum workshop, dig into it. We could certainly go back to the group and try to dig in a little bit more to cost to a phase 2 or more detail. But just wanted to give you, we've been working on this for about, I guess, 6 weeks. Is that fair? Trying to interview some groups. And we do see some promise in this group in helping us, but we know we're not at a point where we're asking you to vote or anything like that.
Even a best case, worst case scenario for cost.
Yeah, a
And this,
range,
like,
a range,
all right.
yeah. I would
Be
not be
helpful.
comfortable committing to a phase 1, just exactly what Eric's saying,
Yeah.
without having,
Right.
because then what's the point if you can't afford phase 2, you're at nothing.
Right.
And for you, I know you don't want to talk about it in depth, but I'm not real clear why we're doing this. I'm not doubting you guys. It would be helpful if you could articulate, like, I understand the math minutes, but that's not all that's driving this, I suppose. So if you could help me understand, like, some more specifics of what I mean, one obvious one too, which I don't even know if we're talking about, is the whole sleep thing, right? We heard years of presentations about that, and we didn't hit the mark that they were telling us would make a big, big difference. So that one, but if you could help articulate the other problems, because I'm not sure I have a really good understanding of all the problems, except math, which is a problem, but.
I think another problem is the shared personnel that we have, because some people teach 7th grade, other people, and then some people those teach 10th or 11th grade, and so like we don't have an identified middle level staff and high school staff, and in a way that brings advantages and in a way it brings disadvantages, because if I'm expected to teach something at the high school level, I need to be available for X number of periods, but I also, that runs into conflict with my middle level, that all the specials have to occur certain periods. So it's very difficult when you have shared staff teaching both middle level and high school. That's a problem. We've talked, I think, a little bit the last time about why such a difference? Why do some middle schools have so many more math minutes than others? Well, because their middle school education looks different. They might not have 4 quarter courses. They might, have 2 semesters. They don't have all of this stuff that happens. And so, really, to me, part of this research and fact finding is, what do we really want our middle level learners to have exposure to? And maybe that means a completely different look at middle level education versus what we currently offer. So I think it goes broader than math minutes, without a doubt. What kind of a middle school experience do we want to have for our students? And if that's the case, how do we make that happen under one roof that's 7 to 12? Because we're going to be under one roof, right? Now, I do believe, and I could investigate, but I believe Tulpehocken is going through this very same situation where they are 7 to 12, and they were operating as a junior senior high, but now I think they're turning into a school within a school and having some. So I could certainly reach out to them to say, what's going to look different for your 7th and 8th grade students then than does now? because I think that's a key piece in some of this. And so, them researching or, what's more common in a middle level versus not as common in a middle level instruction. And there's some of those. So I'm not sure if I'm answering you quite, Mrs. Harenza, but I think it goes beyond.
You need to come up with an answer now, and I think I hear your answer to be like, we don't know all of the problems with the schedule.
Well, isn't it also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the period at the end of the day, that, whatever it is now, 2:35 to 3:05, like, is that really being used to its full benefit? What if we shifted that to the middle of the day? We've
It's
got
a
that
great point.
strange
We're paying 100%
5,
of our
6, 7,
teachers,
8
but
period.
10% of our students are maybe.
Are
utilizing
using it, right, like, so, correct me if I'm wrong,
Right,
but that
that's
could be part of the
another
schedule
piece of
too, like, that is a significant amount of time that maybe could be used in a better way.
The other issue is the board has really supported kids with the last 5 years or so learning in different ways, with internships and other. That's very challenging in a traditional 41-minute bell schedule in a small school because the children have to pick certain classes that are spread throughout the day. So there's a number of issues that I think are challenging, but it doesn't mean in the end that there's only one way to get there. And I think what we've identified in both the math action plan and then I think in the strategic plan, although it's a little broader in how it's written, is that this would be something, at least at some point, we want to talk about. But we know it's a tough conversation, not just the cost of maybe a consultant group, but even taking on a project like this. It can be a little upsetting. It can certainly be difficult. So maybe what we could do is reflect on some of the good questions and comments that we've gathered here tonight, and with the board leadership and Mrs. Kuhn kind of think about what would be the next good time for us to maybe dig into this a little deeper. Developers certainly offered to come. We didn't want to introduce them and bring them, but at some point in this, if we get further along, we would, bring them to talk with the board and answer some questions about, what they could do to support us, how they maybe supported some other, school districts going through at least a scheduled study.
So was our junior, senior high, like many moons ago when I was a student here, 7th and 8th grade was all like kind of confined to the old wing, and 9th through 12 was in, it's not like that now.
There's no difference at all. The minute you're a 7th grader and you're a 7th grade girl in particular, you are fully immersed with 12th grade. Well, it's a thing. It's a thing.
And
yes, they are
all
completely
students,
immersed.
socially,
Yeah, yeah.
emotionally, there's a huge difference between a 7th grader and a senior, and I think and again, bigger issue, another night, but I think that's something we have to take into consideration as well.
Well, I think that's what she's talking about. What would ideal 7th and 8th grade learning look like?
Yeah.
I mean, it may be an urban legend, but I had heard many superintendents ago, the superintendent got here and he said to the board, give me a year to get to know your school district, and I will come back to you with recommendations and my thoughts on what your strengths and weaknesses are. And the word is that in 6 months he came back and he said, I don't need a year to tell you that the worst thing you do is fully integrate 7th and 8th graders with 9th through 12. Now, I don't know if that really is a problem, but at least one person along the way had thought that that it might be. So the other thing I would say is I'd be very interested to know what Dr. Jones thinks about the weaknesses of the schedule are before we would go. I mean, if you're saying that he's the instructional guru of 7 through 12, we'd be interested to know what he thinks.
And we could certainly include him. He was part of it. And I know he particularly is interested in, can we do anything differently 7th, 8th, and 9th, 12th? Which would, because the schedule kind of unlocks, in a sense, sometimes the things that you want to do differently for the students and how you want to teach them and group them. But I know he's very interested in separating, at least exploring if we can.
Yeah.
Can we afford it? What would be the staffing implications? There are some spaces that we have to share. We know that, science labs and gyms and cafeterias. So it isn't that we could separate everything, but I think that's what he would like to get at, but we'll certainly build him into maybe whatever's next. We can reflect a little bit.
And the only thing I would say is that if we're going to be true to our strategic plan, I would love to see us focus as much analysis on mental health as on math. And so I'd love for somebody, I'd love to see Dr. Lengel be the voice of mental health, right? And so we're saying, does our current situation enhance mental health, or does it contribute to stress or anxiety or lack of socialization or integration with kids at different places, developmental, but all that kind of stuff. But we have said that's a priority, so that we sure should be making it better and not making it worse.
Right. I will say though, our bell schedule is the same as it was 30 years ago when I graduated. More than 30 years ago.
More.
Um,
I'm older than you.
And I know, God, change is incremental, it's over time, and it's challenging for some of our seasoned employees who've been here for a long period of time, and this is how we've always done things. But I do think it's worth exploring. You know, they may come back to us with options, and we may say, well, we want to keep it the way it is, but I think we need to. We've done so much over the last 5 years to really adjust our curriculum and what we offer to our students educationally, career path, mental health issues. I think this is the natural progression.
And part of phase 2 is that idea of, you know, they can come to us with these 2 or 3 options, but it's still the decision of the people around the room as to whether or not we will pursue any of them. Now, you know, you've invested quite a bit of money in that, but hopefully you can make an informed decision as to whether or not one of those options should be pursued. So,
I do have one quick question, and maybe Mark can help answer this question. Because when we do things like this, it does drive me crazy when we see the costs of these analysis being done, but they're necessary. When we had the analysis done for the renovation, what was that cost again, roughly?
That was actually bid out.
Yeah.
So I would have to get back to you.
You mean the feasibility
The feasibility study, I know it was pretty high, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a bid. I can make the board that information.
Okay, that would be good, so
Do
that
you remember
others
what
can see.
year that was, that we did the feasibility
I
study?
think we started in 19, and it was finished in 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I think what, you know, feasibility study is a comprehensive look at all our buildings, then with recommendations of what parts of the building needed to be renovated by a professional outside group. So it was, you know, it talked about the board chose some of those areas, but actually looked at all 3 buildings, all 4 buildings, and made recommendations on, you know, where to go. So that's something I know for the new board members, we have it in your, I know we give you a lot of stuff, but it's in that kind of key documents.
But I agree with Terrie, I mean, it's been a very long time, we haven't done this. But I am concerned, like Eric and Kate, that I would like to see a ballpark figure, you know, because it is concerning, like, why would we continue if we can't afford phase 2?
So definitely on our side on this, more to follow, we'll regroup a little bit and work with you to plan a time for more discussion. Thank you. This is very helpful.
oh, well, this is here. Focus number 6, curriculum writing. I just wanna let you know.
You were watching
This is
basketball score,
No,
you were
no,
going
no.
to update us. That would be good.
That we are on target to complete our curriculum writing for K-7 for math by the spring of 2024. So we spent the past year writing and documenting that curriculum. And then also you are well aware that the program of studies was approved in January, which revises that math course sequence as well. So we've made quite a bit of progress on number 6, focus area. And with that, I can conclude.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. More to follow. Obviously, we touched quickly on a few things, but thank you, Dr. Woodard, for pulling that together. Next up, we have our agenda items. So the first is curriculum and technology. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve and ratify the following curriculum and technology items. That's numbers 1 and 2.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call, Mr. Blair.
Mrs. Harenza.
Yes.
Mr. Hershey.
Yes.
Mrs. Kuhn.
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips.
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mr. Schippers.
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor.
Yes.
Mrs. Torres.
Yes.
Mrs. Zabinski.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you.
The next section is finance and facilities. Just want to highlight, thank you to WAIF. You can see some significant grants for some exciting instructional projects, academic projects. Also some other donations on there from different groups to help us with different initiatives and activities. You'll see a couple items that I know Mr. Boyer went over at the previous finance and facilities items. You can see the annual item, the rental of the space for graduation. So certainly that appears before the board each year. So with that, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve and ratify the following finance and facility items, numbers 1 through 8.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hershey,
Yes.
Mrs. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Schippers,
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Torres,
Yes.
Mrs. Zabinski,
Yes.
Mrs. Harenza.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
The next section is personnel policy, and it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve and ratify the following personnel and policy items as presented, and that is numbers 1 through 8.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kuhn,
Yes.
Mrs. Phillips,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Schippers,
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Torres,
Yes.
Mrs. Zabinski,
Yes.
Mrs. Harenza,
Yes.
Mr. Hershey.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any old business? Any new business? Those are the right to know requests. Updates from organizations?
I'm just curious about the
Giving us
right to know.
secret signals over there?
No,
Ms.
go
Cole?
ahead, let's wrap it
So
up.
what are you curious about?
Nope.
You sure?
Yep.
If you want, we can follow up
We
if you have a
will.
question.
Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?